I quit ESPN on college football national championship day, by the way,
No way. You're
was not
crazy.
which is not the smartest thing to do. It was January 9th, 2019. I quit on that day on a Monday. Everyone was just like, no one saw it coming. My palms were sweaty that day. It was definitely crazy, but I don't regret anything that I did. Would I have quit ESPN to go start a company 100% by myself? I doubt that. This idea presented itself, and I was like, I think this is it. This is the thing. This is actually what I have to do. So I think it's a mix of feeling like you have a safety net to be able to quit a corporate job, and then also just the idea of finding you. Like, you're the pioneer to actually have to build this now. So
Welcome to Pinnacle Code, where we spotlight excellence in the culture. I'm your host, Ben Arthur. Excited to be joined by Tiffany Kelly. She is a successful entrepreneur, a trailblazer based out of New York City. She is the founder and CEO of Curastory, a platform that helps athletes, creators, influencers distribute and monetize their video and social media content. She's raised millions of dollars for her company, which I might add. She's been featured in a number of news outlets as well, and a recent honoree on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. So she's doing things at the highest levels if you kind of get recognized on that list. Tiffany, it's so good to see you. Thanks for joining the show.
yeah, of course. I'm excited to chat and be here.
Yeah. Excited to kind of do this as we were kind of talking beforehand. Like we'd been trying to get this going for a little while. Had some technical difficulties the last time we
Yes,
recorded, but finally able to
we
kind of
made
get
it.
things. Yeah, we made it, and
Yeah.
that's all that matters. Um, so let's kind of start at the beginning. I want to kind of get down to like your upbringing. So my understanding is that
Yeah.
you are from Baton Rouge,
Yes.
Louisiana. So what do people need to know about your upbringing there to understand who you are today?
Yeah, totally. I think a few things stand out. I mean, just being super close with my family when it comes to sports, I think
Mm.
not surprising. I found myself working in sports. But every single person in my family has played a sport either on the collegiate level or just kind of very seriously. And so my brother, basketball was his thing. My dad actually swam. He was one of the first national black champions at Morehouse. He
Sheesh.
will not let anyone forget that. Um, no, it's so funny. I think Sports Illustrated just did an article on him and his team recently, and he always like a Sports Illustrated vault article or something. So, or early pre Sports Illustrated madness. Um, and my mom, her sport was basketball, and my sport was volleyball. So I think that was definitely a defining just like thread just between my family and just kind of why I love sports so much. Also, I think growing up in the South, as a Black woman and person of color, I think was really interesting. I went to, I mean, just predominantly white school, just my entire life, middle school, elementary school, high school. So just kind of always being, I guess, othered or um, just not, I think it was like 0.05%, like of my high school were people of color, like not just like Black, but like people of color
Wow.
in general. Yeah, I know, pretty crazy. Um, and I've been to private school my entire life. Actually, funny enough, even my university was a private institution. So, um, I think that also kind of sticks out. But yeah, I think just growing up with this kind of chip on your shoulder, um, and then also just loving sports, and then also just being extremely close with my family, I feel like are um some things that, just really kinda stick out in me playing competitive sports, throughout my entire career up until collegiate, so, yeah.
So kind of being, as you said, kind of being othered, kind of
Yeah,
growing up, predominantly white schools. You said kind of private school education. Um, I'm curious, like how that maybe informs like the standard you wanted to hold yourself to.
yeah,
Just because, like I think I heard in a podcast like how you because of that you kind of gravitated towards numbers, like concrete
yeah,
numbers, because with kind of like quantitative fields, like you can't dispute like the
yeah,
result of someone. Like
yeah,
so can you talk a little bit more about how just that environment, predominantly white, like and in the South too,
yeah,
just kind of shape like your drive or your motivation?
totally. No, of course. Definitely like shout out to my parents because I think both of them went to HBCUs. So my dad went to Morehouse and my mom went to Grambling, also in Louisiana. But they really just taught me to any room that I enter, don't act like you don't belong there. You're there for a reason and you have a place there because you're in those rooms. But if something were to happen, like if people were to look at you funny or question you, like don't be naive either. So it was just like don't expect, but don't like not expect it to happen.
Mhm.
So which is a really interesting, I think, just kind of like dichotomy to think about. And just I mean, being told that pretty early and pretty young, really just kind of shaped just the way that I carried myself in rooms, I think. Um, and yeah, I knew I wanted to work in sports. And I think when you're a woman, um, and you want to work in sports, I feel like people kind of typically push and if you're like moderately attractive, I feel like people kind of push you to like in front of the camera, like go in front of the camera, just like do that. And I actually it wasn't something that I really wanted to do. Like I didn't really have my heart in it. So I feel like and it was always the first thing I think people always mentioned to me, like, oh, you should follow this career path. And I was just like, well, I don't really want to do that. What other things in sports can I do? Um, and my mom actually coded, so I think apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but, um, I just naturally gravitated towards, um, data science and sports analytics, and it was actually really kind of growing a little bit faster, around the time that I was kind of in high school, um, and analytics and having analysts on teams and kind of trade deadline and just all these big decisions that general managers and front offices were actually using more quantitative data, just more detailed data and data science to actually make these decisions. And so, um, I job shadowed with the New Orleans Hornets at the time, the NBA
Mm.
team, which is the Pelicans now, and um, they were super busy that night. I was actually supposed to job shadow the marketing team. Just kinda learn as a senior in high school, just, like, what careers existed in sports. And so they stuck me with the stats guys because like, "We don't have time to handle you right now because Will Ferrell is here tonight, so we're gonna stick you with this team." Um, and I mean, that just really changed the course of my life. I was this I don't even know how old I was. I was probably like 17 or 16, just hanging out with all these dudes and just tagging along. And also they probably paid so much attention to me because they don't have job shadows like ever. So um that was really interesting just being able to go everywhere in the arena with them and even into the president's suite.
Mm.
That was just like crazy. And the locker rooms, like all these different places were these super, super high up, um, individuals that were running the Hornets and just these huge teams were just like all in these rooms. And I mean, I was the only woman. I was definitely the only person of color. So I think that was like a like a signal to me. It's like, okay, this might be different or interesting and not usually the norm. Um, and the denominator, like common denominator for me for that happening was numbers, right? Because these
Yeah.
are men that are running statistics. They're the stats guys for the team. And they were able to kind of command these rooms and go into these rooms. And so I just peeped the pattern super early and kind of just jumped onto that. And I was like, they command respect. People respect them. So numbers equals respect. And that's kind of just the assumption that I formulated at a very, very young age. Um, and that's kind of how I crafted my career after that. But yeah, a very life altering moment, I would say, at a very young age for sure.
So you mentioned the Hornets. I know you spent some time at LSU as well. I wanna say the Miami Heat too, is
Yes.
that accurate? Yep. Okay, yeah,
Yes.
Miami Heat. And what was it? I know at ESPN you were what, like a sports analytics associate, and
Correct.
correct me if I'm wrong, but you were like the first, like, black person, like, ever, like, in the history of your team or
Yes.
something like that? Like,
Yes.
what was that like?
Yeah. I mean, wild. I yeah, I was the first black person on my team. Um, I was the only black woman in a 400 person department. So I think that needs to be explained.
Yeah.
It's actually funny. I think it was might have after I quit ESPN, but I was in New York with one of my friends from college, and they were actually talking to people that used to work with, and they were just like, "Oh, yeah, like, one of my really good friends from college, um, used to work at ESPN," and they're just like, "Oh, what does she do?" It's like, "Oh, I mean, she does, like, analytics. You might not know her. ESPN's really huge." Or, like, Tiffany, like, everybody knows Tiffany because she was one of one in a sea of people. So, um, yeah, no, I mean, fascinating. I think, again, it kind of is just this reoccurring pattern, I think, just
Yeah.
always being one of the onlys,
Mhm.
which I think is just successful people of color. I feel like that is a common thread or trend that I feel like all of us have sometimes. Um, but I mean, I was able to do a lot of really groundbreaking things, I think, across my career. Definitely with the Miami Heat and being one of a couple of people that they brought on from. Um, I went to Nova Southeastern University, but they also had some interns from the U from Miami. Um, Working on trade deadlines. So we did the Dragic trade, which was fascinating to
Oh,
watch
mhm.
in real time. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, and also just like the way that front offices move. And I mean, just Pat Riley and Rich Fernando and Eric Spoelstra and just these amazing humans that have just kind of honestly the pinnacle of their career, just um that you just watch movies and shows about was just kind of in awestruck a little bit. And it was funny, the Miami Heat was actually one of the, I would say, later teams in the NBA to adopt analytics. Spoelstra is a big proponent of analytics, but, the way that some, the top front office would talk about analytics was kind of funny. Um, so I think that also made me, like, figure out my skills of how to explain things in a way
Yeah.
that's just people are able to, digest it and not just immediately write off or ignore what's coming out of your mouth because it sounds like jargon. So, um, that and then also when I was kind of at LSU, just incubating this algorithm that I was building and being able to present that at MIT, which is how I was able to get the ESPN job. So I built this hustle difficulty complex when I was at LSU working with athletics and the basketball team. Um, and, like, around the time that Ben Simmons was there as well, and it was essentially quantifying how many points were given and stopped just by hustling, either
Right.
on the offensive or defensive side. So the NBA had just come out with like 5 metrics that they started to track that weren't on the normal statistics box score, um, that kind of quantified hustle. So I think it was charges drawn, loose balls recovered, um, shots deflected,
Mhm.
just a lot of different statistics. And I basically just made an algorithm that would be able to quantify points. And it was actually kind of a second version of he's kind of like the godfather of analytics, but Dean Oliver. He's worked with almost every front office. So it was a version 2.0 of his algorithm. I kind of just expanded upon it and presented that at MIT, and ESPN gave me a job offer super quickly. So yeah, no, it's been a very interesting career path that kind of started with this one little decision made that no thought was put into it to kind of stick me with the stats guys that I've been able to do some really, really cool things over my career for sure.
So Tiffany, how do we go from that, where, it seems like even though you're like the other, right? But you clearly have a talent, and you could probably look 10, 15, 20 years down the line, and you could be in a really awesome place, like along the
Yeah.
sport analytics path. But then you say, screw the stability of all that, and I'm gonna be an entrepreneur and start Curastory. What was
Yeah.
that thought process like in terms of jumping into the deep end on that?
Yeah, totally. Fascinating thoughts running through my mind. I also want to say nobody in my family, no, I take that back. Actually, I was gonna say nobody in my family is an entrepreneur, but that's actually not true. My first cousin, just because it's not like cousin, like my actual first cousin,
Yeah.
is Stacy Spikes, who's the co-founder and CEO of MoviePass. That has a movie coming out right now, directed by Mark Wahlberg, and just the craziness that MoviePass was. Um, and just the rise of his company. So literally our Thanksgivings are just like me and him talking about
Yeah.
kind of world domination and everyone else looking at us like we're crazy. Um but my parents were entrepreneurs. So I feel like it's easier for people to go into entrepreneurship if they just kind of see it more frequently. So my immediate family were into entrepreneurship. So yeah, it really was a slight left that everyone is kind of scratching their head a little bit. They didn't really understand it. Um, don't get me wrong, ESPN was amazing, and I feel like I definitely had the opportunity to have a job that I think so many people covet, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, I also rose up in the ranks super quickly. Um, my first day, I was given a algorithm to build, um, and I was actually given it because it was deemed as not as important as like the football power index or the win probability metrics that are just all across our programming.
Mhm.
And on every single show, like Paul Feinbaum or Sports Center, things like that. So they were like, we'll give this to Tiff, get her feet wet, first day at ESPN, like test to see what she would do. So it was the fan happiness index. Um, and obviously for college football specifically. So obviously kind of being raised in Baton Rouge, college football town. Um, I was actually really excited just because I was got to build something that as a college football fan, what do I care about? And I just felt like I definitely was the right person to build it because I just knew so deeply. It's like it's not if we keep winning, are we happy? It's actually so many other things in that. If we beat Alabama, we're very happy. So there's
Yeah.
some rivalry metrics that matter, um, and kind of win in game, like chance probability to win. Um, sentiment analysis on Twitter using like the official, unofficial hashtag of the school. So I got like 3 months to really build this thing out and an arsenal across ESPN, just so many different teams that I could just like reach out to get data and information and have them do things, which was really fun. And as soon as we launched it, it got over 1 million views within 24 hours. Like it was viral. And John Skipper, former ESPN president, reporting in the Bob Iger at Disney, came out and said, "This is amazing. This is exactly what we should be doing at this company," like publicly. So then everyone's just like, "Okay, Tiff, you just crushed something." So don't get me wrong, it was a quick ascent, I think, at ESPN. I feel like where it got really interesting and difficult for me was um I got I was given the opportunity to actually start going on TV, which wasn't really in the cards.
Mm.
Clearly from I don't want to go on TV. That's why I chose numbers, but it was given to me in a way that was actually, we want you to be an analyst. Like we,
Mhm.
as a female, we want you to be an analyst and actually, which obviously you work in sports and media network. Like that's completely different, right? Like a
Yeah.
female analyst on a network television show for sports. Um, like nobody in programming is jumping up and down to put nerds on TV. Like, let's just be honest. So, um, the fact that this came about was actually really huge and kind of career defining. And I think it was really tough, just internal politics. Um, that yeah, it just was a really interesting, I think, the way that it played out. So I really just had to make a decision. Do I kind of stay at a company that I'm really just like forced to stay behind the computer and just like code?
Mm.
Uh, or do I kind of branch out and truly have like no ceiling on my career, right? In whatever ways that that dovetails.
Yeah.
So, really difficult decision. And definitely, I think I was very, 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 very risky. Um, I actually brought it to my parents just because one of my good friends at ESPN that I connected with, um, we were just kind of tinkering on this startup idea. And she needed someone to code. And so I kind of was just talking to my parents as like everything's going on behind the scenes at ESPN. Um, and just they were just like, I mean, you're not getting any younger. So if
Mhm.
you were to quit a comfortable job, you should do it now before you just kind of have the stressors of life just later in life. And so that was one piece of information logged in my brain. But I actually didn't end up quitting until um so a lot of the experiences in my career and just algorithms and things that I've built actually allowed me to speak at Facebook. And so it was a women in analytics conference at Facebook that I went to go speak at. And after that, the organizer, who was head of data science at Instagram, when I got back and went to New York for a weekend, um, I went in office at Instagram and I kind of was just like asking him for advice and just like, hey, this is kind of what's going on at ESPN. Um, I love it, but there might be kind of a ceiling to what I can and can't do. Um, this opportunity is kind of in front of my face with a tech startup,
Mm.
whole new world to me.
Mhm.
Um, just kind of would love your advice and just what you think. And he was like, honestly, you have an amazing mind, and if the tech startup doesn't work out, like you always have a job here at Instagram. And like that was kind of, I think, it's not even like the opportunity at working at Instagram. It was just kind of this aha moment that like no matter what happens, I will literally be okay. Right? Like if company fails or not, I will be fine and I will be able to land on my feet. And so, actually, I think after that conversation, I quit ESPN on college football national championship day, by the way,
No way. You're
was not
crazy.
which is not the smartest thing to do. It was January 9th, 2019. I quit on that day on a Monday. Everyone was just like, no one saw it coming. Um, and my palms were sweaty that day. Like it was definitely crazy, but I don't regret anything that I did. Um, and I think also just the winding road to get here because I actually didn't start Curastory fresh out of ESPN. So, um, and would I have quit ESPN to go start a company 100% by myself? I doubt that. The interesting road that I went down was quitting ESPN when we already had a quarter of a million already raised for another idea that someone was
Mm,
already working on. I was just going to be a co-founder and kind of code. So there's some stability there. Because I knew nothing about tech startups. And then when kind of that fizzled out a little bit, then it was around the time NIL really started happening. And I was kind of
mm,
thinking about this at ESPN actually when I was at LSU and um, just creator economy and the dichotomy between creator economy and media conglomerates and how creators are the new media companies and enablement and solutions that need to exist for them to be able to pump out content like an ESPN or like a media conglomerate. So I was in the middle of all of that at ESPN because Mike and Mike got canceled. The Six got canceled. Like all these huge shows were canceled in a couple of years that I was there, which seeing everyone react to that had been at ESPN for, like, decades was
mm,
fascinating because it was just this, like, looming thing that, like, creator economy is here, and we don't know how to handle this. So,
mm.
uh, I think it was a beautiful just aggregation of, I live in New York full time now. I'm not working on this startup anymore. What do I do now? Um, and this idea presented itself and I was like, I think this is it. This is the thing. This is actually what I have to do. So I think it's a mix of feeling like you have a safety net to be able to quit a corporate job.
Yeah.
Um, and then also just the idea of finding you. Like you're the pioneer to actually have to build this now. So um and just kind of perfect dynamic, honestly. So long-winded answer, but
Yeah, no, I
are happening in the background that allowed me to quit.
for sure, and yeah, there are a couple things that I wanna hit on, like, number 1, like, I think your situation was you had, like, the perfect launch point, right? Like, it was almost like an ascension towards Curastory, right? Like, you were
Yeah,
with that startup, and then from there, with that knowledge and all your experiences, you were able to kinda migrate, into Curastory, and but then, like, when you were leaving ESPN, you knew you had, like, that security and comfort of, of a job at Meta, and so I'm wondering for people who may not have that same opportunity, but they have, like, that inkling to maybe get into entrepreneurship, what advice would you give to them
mm,
about cultivating, like, the comfort to be able to take that leap? Like, maybe
yeah.
people like you who don't come from an entrepreneurship family, and you're kind of battling that dichotomy within yourself. Like, what advice would you maybe give to
Yeah,
people to like find that comfort?
totally. I mean, the safety net is really, really, really important. I don't want to kind of like ignore that because when, and yes, I learned so much information at the previous startup where it's like, how do you raise from investors? How do you run a company? What to do, what not to do? Like so many things that were actually really helpful um, where I'm just kind of like learning by fire for 6 months. Um, and but whenever that fizzled out and it didn't work, I went back to the basics. I was like, "Okay, I have to pay the bills. So let me do some consulting, like data science consulting." And from our investors at the previous like startup that I was working at, um, they actually connected me to a lot of investors and VC funds up here in New York that actually they needed consultants for data science. So, and I also honestly had the safety net of my parents for a little bit as well. So, those two things, whatever your safety net ends up being, like if you need to stay at your full time job a little bit longer to build up that safety net for finances, or maybe you build up your Rolodex of just um, like just having contract work that you can do and like clients, whatever it is, I always say at least have, and if you don't need to raise funding, then great. I mean, just as long as you have a runway. And we're just talking about Curastory. Our first sales were in 2022. I incorporated August 2019.
3
So,
years. Yeah.
yeah, just looking at that, and of course, we raised VC capital, so I was able to fully focus on it full time. But if you don't raise VC capital and if you decide to not seek funding, then I mean, plan for that, honestly, for that runway. We also have deep tech. So it took us a year to actually build the platform, just because we're an ad technology. So it was a little bit more intense than I think just building a pretty UX over like Google Sheets and APIs. Um, no, not knocking anybody that has a business like that. If it makes money, it makes money. Um, but that was the timeline that I needed. So I would say if you don't raise VC capital, stay at whatever is kind of helping you pay the bills for that allotted period of time. Or if it is having a safety net, like family members or things like that, that are kind of giving you the go ahead to do that, then by all means. I think also being able to test your idea to make sure that it's a valid idea and the market actually wants your idea is extremely important. And so many founders um skip this step. I actually did user interviews for 6 months before I touched product. Like, I was just a sponge, and I was interviewing the top YouTubers, I was interviewing brands, advertisers, I was interviewing student athletes, I was interviewing pro athletes. Like, I was interviewing every single person in my network that I've built up for years to just learn, and also people from ESPN as well and media to learn creator economy, what tools were out there for video creators to be able to kind of build media businesses and video businesses. Um, how are they monetizing? What worked? What didn't? I did that for 6 months before I had all of this data. And I was like, this is the solution. Like, this, from all these user interviews, the responses to these questions is exactly what we have to build. And so, um, I would say don't quit and don't let go of the safety net until you truly, truly know, like, this actually makes sense, and what we should be building for. I feel like if you do all of those things, like, you'll be totally fine.
What is the kind of like, so much of that is like patience and
Yeah. Oh my
delayed
god.
gratification, right? And I think especially like in the world we live in, like people want things now and now and now, but you're like, you said you did 6 months of interviews before you even really started getting going. So like, I guess maybe for you, a part of it is innate. Maybe a part of it is having been an athlete growing up. But how do
Mm.
maybe people like cultivate the patience required to really be in entrepreneurship for real? Right.
to be in this for real, for real. No, I know. I mean, it's so interesting. I feel the I don't know, the energy, the gusto to wanna, like, keep going is so important. And someone told me if you never run out of, like, things to build, if you have consistent users requesting new things for your product, like, that's a good place to be. Like, if you just run out of ideas or things to build for something that need to be built, like, that's a scary place to be. So I still even struggle with that now, like, patience, because it's like, I see so far what we have to do and, like, vision that I feel like I'm so far behind. Um, but I'd say it's definitely the way my mind is. Um, but it really does come down to, like, momentum shifts. I think, if you think too far ahead, I think it can get a little bit frustrating. And yeah, I do think this potentially could come from playing a collegiate sport. My brother and me and just my whole family were just kind of wired this way, but um, it's always the next momentum shift. So, and I've said this before, but it's if you're down in a game, let's just literally use sports as an example. Like if you're down in a game, 30-5, I don't know. If it's football, that sucks, but just because we know. But if you're down 30-5, you literally can't leave the game, right? Like, you just have to keep playing. And so, but there are also games where that is the score and the other team can still come back. And it's always these like little momentum changes. Um, and so I really like to think of things that way, where it's just like, okay, this sucked. Um, this was really tough. I just need this one thing to happen, and like I know exactly what to do, or um just kind of the mentality switches a little bit. So it really just
Mm,
comes down to determination and like um momentum shifts. Um and also like, do you really care about the problem that you're solving, right? Like um I think what's so interesting is, to your point, all of these experiences over my life have kind of just like met this pinnacle of building
mhm,
Curastory. Like I've worked with athletes my entire life. Um kind of before ESPN. And then I kind of switched from front offices and working directly with athletes to the media side. And so just kind of being in media and learning about media and how it operates and advertising and just kind of all these different things. Um, and then I moved to the tech startup world to just get a little taste as well, and just kind of how to build and how not to build. And then now I'm just kind of on this grand stage of like putting all those 3 things together on my own. And so, um, I think it really just comes down to, and I'm so excited for all of that, because the problem that I'm working on is so interesting, and building the video and like the enablement tool for video creators to build media companies is excites me and is very exciting to solve for. And think like Spotify for podcasters or like Beehive for newsletters. Like that's exactly what we're doing for video creators. And it's just a very exciting time and a very exciting place to build. So um, even though if I'm like down, I mean, just always going back to that, because it's gotten to the point where creators rely on us for monetization. So
mm.
you become a really powerful company
Yeah.
if you're actually empowering people financially. It's like we literally can't go down. Like our app can't go down.
A good
So
place to be. Yeah.
yeah, so I think just always kind of going back to the mission um, is also very empowering as well, and just kind of gives me that extra like talking to users gives you an extra an energy too, because it's like, oh yeah, we built this for a reason. Like every time I'm on a sales call, it's like we built this for a reason. So I would look at things that way, um, to kind of help with the patience that it takes to really kind of build this. And I mean, leaning on like a network of relationships, like that's actually really, really important. I think when you're building and an entrepreneur, I feel like the lows just hit so much harder. Um, and especially the lows for the company, but also the lows in like personal life as well. It's kind of this just like aggregation of so much stuff. And so I think just having a good network of relationships and people to lean on, whether that's family or um, friends or partners, spouses, like things like that, which is so funny because, like, Tiffany 5 years ago would not be saying this. Um, I was just like in a dungeon coding. Like, that was literally me for 5 years. I'm not going to go outside to look at the sun. I just need to like
Yeah.
build this thing, but, kind of taking a step back and actually just, like, looking at everything, it's like I've always had family or friends, um, new partnership now that just, like, they help a lot when kind of this life is actually very, very, very difficult, so, hopefully those things are helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and something you said, like you mentioned, like, kinda the lows that come naturally with entrepreneurship, and I'm wondering, in what ways can those maybe be unique, being specifically a Black female in the entrepreneurship space? Like, what do you think are your unique challenges just because of kinda who you are, what you look like, if you've had it?
Yeah. Right. Um, totally. I think, yeah, building a company is gonna be hard for anybody. I think specifically as a woman and a Black woman, I think, and I also actually look at obstacles as like an enjoyment, to problem solve and figure out. Again, probably my crazy brain, but just like data scientists, just everything's a math problem. But first thing, I mean, just talking about funding, fundraising is the number one most difficult thing for any entrepreneur, no matter what you look like or where you come from. I think not having the networks make it a little bit more difficult. Um, and so when I got to New York and I kind of parted ways on the previous startup, um, our investor actually connected me to a ton of top funds and investors up here in New York. Um, because I had let him know that I'm, like, tinkering on this new idea, which was Curastory at the time, and so he connected me to all these top funds. I'm telling you, like, the first investors in Uber and just, like, just all these funds, and imagine me, this, like, 21-year-old, 22-year-old, just, like, walking in. Actually, I wasn't that old. I think I was, like, 24, 25. But, um, just, like, walking in these offices with no deck and, just kinda just, like, talking to them and these signals that they're getting that I'm not even realizing, and it wasn't until a Black woman sat me down. She was a partner at a VC fund up here. She's actually on our board now, Maisha Leak, she's amazing. She actually, like, stopped me. She's like, "Okay, let me be the last investor that you talk to. Like, don't I need you to basically have everything in order before you go back out to, like, the biggest funds in the world to try to, like, raise capital." So I was, like, in a territory that I just never really played in before, and they are just in this world so long that there are these signals that I'm not even realizing are signals, right?
Mm.
That make them just kinda, like, judge you or, "Okay, like, I'm definitely not giving a check to her," right? And so, um, that was it was I'm so happy that Maisha actually just, like, stopped me in my tracks and just kinda told me, and from there, I ended up doing Y Combinator Startup School. I ended up doing another program called Tacklebox, and these were 2 fundamental programs that really helped you, um, test your idea, make sure the market needed your idea. Um, and then I did a fundraising boot camp called Adamant Ventures, and he was a partner at Greycroft and actually like coaching you on the lingo that investors use. And so just like as granular as that. And so kind of all these things that I just kind of course corrected a little bit. But within that time frame, I raised equity crowdfunding, which is basically um, the guy next door online on a platform like investing in you. And that we did about 250K for our first like pre-seed raise, and that was enough to be able to hire a founding engineer, hire designers, and actually build like version 1 of the product. Um, but I think it's incredibly difficult, I feel like, to yeah, to not kind of come from these networks and needing to be able to raise true capital. And especially if you have a deep tech platform, like we have, like ad technology, it's very specific. It's not like I can just put things together with like a stick of tape or glue and just kind of like get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of sales from that. Like we actually have to build this deep technology, which takes money. Um, and I think what's probably one of the most like gut wrenching things to hear, and these are like former employees, it's like, why haven't we hired for this? Or why haven't we hired for this? And it's so difficult because it's just like, y- we need money to do that, right? Like
Yeah.
wanting to be able to hire all these necessary things that you need to be able to build a really big company is so paramount. Um, and we just raised fewer dollars than most. And it really is a network game and a relationship game. And I'm still doing it. I'm still learning it. And we're raising our Series A right now, which is going really well. And just so many things that I've kind of learned this round that I've never done before. Um, but I think those kind of comments are really tough and gut wrenching to hear, just kind of knowing what the market is for us. Um, that I want to be able to truly exit Curastory to be a success that way and like give back to founders that way they don't really have to go through just kind of what I've gone through um when it comes to the hiring. I have to fact check the data and I'll send it to you, but I think I was listening to this podcast where Black founders, CEOs, we only employ, I think maybe like 2 or 3% of the job market. It's a very insignificant amount. And that really hit me because um wanting to hire people and like give people a living because they believe in the company and what we're building, but not being able to because we've raised so fewer dollars is actually so tough to like think about. Um, so I think that's probably like the number one thing that I really deal with. Um, again, fundraising is hard for everybody, but abysmal for us.
Right.
Um, and yeah, everything else, I think it's really just that's really the main thing. No one questions me on my idea anymore. Like it makes sense. We're clearly making money. Um, and no one questions me on my experience or anything. Just because I have so much of it as well, and just like, specifically just like a thought leader, just what in exactly what I'm doing and building for. So fundraising is the only thing.
Okay. And I want to go back a second because you're speaking of that, that black lady who you said is now on the board for Curastory, that conversation like she had with you, what because as you said, like it's like really a network game and certain people are in certain circles and you're already at a kind of a disadvantage. So I'm wondering what exactly did she tell you that helped you to move different in an environment where you're already at a disadvantage? Like what was the game from her?
Well, yeah, what was no, we actually had dinner on Monday. And she's just like, I'm like, you've been here since day 0. And she's just like, I'm honestly honored to just like be able to watch your ascent. Like it's amazing and phenomenal. And she's like, I even knew on that day when you came into my office to just like pitch the fund. I don't know. I feel like people just kind of have a sense of these things, right? Like this person's on the right path. Let me just like correct her over here a little bit or nudge her a little bit over here. Um, so it really was like being able to craft like the perfect pitch deck, and kind of sending me some examples of that. Um, and yes, obviously you can Google like problem, solution, like market, like all these different slide templates of how to build a deck. But truly, like what investors actually want to see in a deck and the story and the arc. Um, and then just the way that you pitch the business. I'm trying to like think of an example. Because I was very much coming from like media and ESPN and NIL is gonna be huge and just like creator economy and just like all these changes that I was like seeing underneath the surface at this media conglomerate. I'm just like, how is this not a no-brainer to everybody? But people don't understand if they're literally investors that stay in their offices and they don't work in media. So the best investors know that founders are going to know the business better than them and the market better than them. That's the literal reason why they're investing in you. Um, so she was like, she's like, I completely believe you that this is going to be a big idea and a big shift and a big market. I need you to package it in a way
Mm,
that like someone that writes a check is going to digest it and understand it. So that was really the conversation, and she gave me a lot of different resources, some of the ones that I mentioned earlier, um, to really be able to craft that story and that messaging, um, and exactly just the verbiage that investors use that they know you know what you're doing.
right.
Um, and you're not just this person that kinda walked in off the street that, like, has this idea, you know what I mean? There's so many of those. It's like, being able to kind of package it and really just, like, lay it out for them, just like also a forecast too, just like what exactly you're gonna do day in and day out to be able to get to this level of revenues over a period of
Yeah.
time. So, um, yeah, and that's really kinda what she told me and stopped me, and I am forever thankful for her, because not that many people do that, and yes, I do think because she was a Black woman, she did that on purpose, um, and I think, just really lifting up, I mean, our communities and people that look like us, because if I did the same thing in another office, they probably would not have stopped me in my tracks to kinda help me, so, yeah.
So, Tiffany, as you've kind of like talked about, like, um, such a like small percentage of, um, VC funding, private equity funding. I mean, so like from what I've learned, like a very, very small
Sure.
percentage actually goes to like Black people. Like I think it's like single digit percentage points, maybe
It's
even
basically
half.
0. It's
Yeah, it's basically zero. But I say that to say you're one of the few who've actually been able. You're part of that very
yeah,
small percent, right? And
yes.
so I guess how much pride do
Mhm.
you maybe take in that? Like, and I think as you've kind of talked too, like you take so much from what I'm hearing you say, the way you're coming across, you take so much pride in like the struggle
Yeah,
almost.
yeah.
So I guess with that said, like how I guess how much of a motivator is that for you, like, just being kind of the other as we've talked about, but you're still able to kinda get through the glass ceiling, so to speak. Like, is
Yeah.
that something you wrap your identity around almost, if that kinda makes sense?
Yeah, I definitely welcome it. I mean, so the the one of the tattoos I actually have on my back is "There's no progress without struggle," which is kind of funny, but also my dad said that to me consistently growing up. So we basically, how do I explain this? Um, he made struggling, I don't want to say this to sound bad, but struggling was kind of like normal. Like I wasn't shell shocked if like a problem happened, right? Like it was always, what are we going to do to get over this? Like, what's the problem solving that we can do? Like, truly, what I was saying earlier, looking at obstacles as like learning moments and a moment to actually figure it out. I mean, I feel like, and just being optimistic when an obstacle comes. And I've realized that some of the most successful people and entrepreneurs think like that. Like, we have to be wildly optimistic, and even, like, founding members on a team, right? So, and that's one trait. If you ask anybody that knows me, they're just like, "Tiffany is annoyingly optimistic." Like, I like, even in my relationship, right? Like, he's just like, "I don't understand. You never get mad." Like, you just never, you it's just, which could, I mean, I could probably be annoying sometimes, but really just, I think, taking obstacles, and welcoming the challenge and, like, welcoming the struggle. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of how I'm wired and, like, hard coded, and, um, really being my parents. I mean, my parents were, like, what, middle, I don't even know. Were they upper middle school maybe in civil rights? Like, they just, I don't know. I feel like, it's kinda passed down. It's just like
Mhm.
struggle is kinda commonplace. And I don't, I, like I said, I don't wanna say that to glorify it, but, um, why not kinda go through these uncomfortable things that way the next girl or man that looks like me does not have to go through this, right? They can raise 10,000,000 like that. So, um I kind of always bring it back to that. It's less about me and more about, I think, just the industry as a whole moving forward from my experience and kind of what I'm doing. So, um, if you don't welcome the struggle, it's you're definitely gonna have a really, really hard time with building. Um, so I think just kind of being okay with that and kind of welcoming it will definitely be the determinant to help you succeed.
I love it. Tiffany, where can people find you on social media, and also to learn more about Curastory and
Yes.
everything that you have going on?
Um, Tip and Kel is my handles across everything. So Instagram, LinkedIn, X, all the things. So TIFFMKELL. Um, and then yeah, curastory.co is our website. Um, we are closing our Series A, so you guys should see that news, I would say, over the next couple of months. Um, and from that, launching so many more enablement features for video creators. For the past, I would say, um, yeah, 3-ish years, we've just really kind of nailed, um, advertising monetization in our ad network for video creators. Um, and it's just like podcast reads, so but for video. So you just kind of splice in ads in your own voice in your videos. Um, Now after this raise, we're like really, really, really focused on, um, enablement for creators. Like, how can you actually, like, what are the things that you need to actually build a video business? And outside of just like editing, obviously, like tools like that, but, um, just so many more enablement tools to just really grow your video business. So, very excited for that for any creators or
Absolutely.
wanna be creators that are also listening to this as well.
Definitely. Yeah, I know I have a lot of creators and whatnot who follow me, a lot of folks in media. So, um, everyone listening, like all that will be kind of in the show notes. So please be sure to
Yeah.
check out the Curastory platform. And last one for you, Tiffany. I ask all my guests this at the end, but it's kind of a big question too. So just warning you,
Uh-oh.
but what do what does Black success mean to you?
Oh, man. Of course, I like go horse as you ask this question. Um, oh, that's tough. I mean, for me, it really is building a pathway for the next generation. I think I don't really just look at this as like a singular success for myself. It never was just that, or it never was about that. Um, and I also just look at what my parents did to be able to do this for me, right? To get to this point. Like I went to the best schools growing up, um, just in all these crazy rooms, like traveling to so many countries before I'm like 25 and just all these things that my parents have never been able to do. And so I really do truly think that is um the heart of Black success, being able to truly like pay it forward, and create a pathway for the next generation. That's really, I mean, that's my life, I think, on this planet. Like that is the one thing that I care about. And I think even after Cura Story exits, like what do I do after? Right? Like it will be giving back. It will be investing because I've had my own true wealth and capital at that point. Like
Yeah,
um literally putting dollars where my mouth is. So um just I truly think that what is what Black success is, and I feel like we have to pay it forward for the next generation, and it gets me excited talking about it all the time. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I love that question.
Awesome. Yeah, and I love the response. But yeah, Tiffany, thank you so much for your time, and for all you listeners, appreciate you guys for tuning in to this latest episode of Pinnacle Code. I appreciate everyone's support and the subscribers and all the followers across my social media platforms as well. And just as a reminder, the show is obviously on YouTube. You're probably listening to it there, but also on Spotify, and then um, in terms of social media usage, predominantly on Instagram and also TikTok as well. But until next time, I will see you guys soon. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, Tiffany.
Yes.